I just offered you the thought that if we're to evaluate attempts to show that there can be perception without awareness, the first thing we need is to establish what would count as a test for perception. Let me try to explain why that is. I'm returning to the fabulous Dretske on perception without awareness. Dretske notes this: if psychologists can really identify something that deserves to be called perception without awareness, if they can do that, they must have an operational grasp on what it takes to perceive something. So the answer to the question that we're looking at, what would count as a test for perception, should already be in the experiments that we've considered. We can extract the test and then see whether we think it's reasonable. So what does it take to perceive something according to the studies that we have considered? Well, here's what seems to be happening. When we think about the Weiskrantz et al. Experiment involving blind sight, the argument seems to be, look, I present visual stimuli, patterns of illumination with one or another orientation, horizontal or vertical. My subject can discriminate those with a very high degree of accuracy. You saw that the subject was at 95% accuracy. So if there's discrimination of visual stimuli, presumably there's perception. But I think, although that's a promising idea, we shouldn't really accept that uncritically. Or really, that's what Dretske says. Dretske says, look, in order for there to be perception, you must have got information about the thing, but we need a little bit more than that. And Dretske illustrates that point by appeal to ragweed. So here you've got some ragweed. I shouldn't stand too close to it because, the ragweed is supposed to be pretty poisonous and bad for the skin and will perhaps cause a rash. So I'm not going to touch it to demonstrate that. I'm not so committed, but I am getting there. You know what, maybe I will. Yeah, that's definitely going to cause you a rash. In getting a rash from the ragweed, I've got some information about it. I'm now carrying information about the ragweed, for sure, on my skin. So that if an expert comes along and I show the rash, the expert will say, yep, you've been near ragweed. So there's information about ragweed, the presence of ragweed, that I'm carrying around with me. And even if I've got no clue how this thing happened and what ragweed is and have never connected the rash with the thing, experts can. So the information is there, it's being carried. But, says Dretske, this isn't a case of perception. This is not a case of perception. Merely carrying around information about something can be caused by, in this case, reacting to it. There's a chemical reaction to the ragweed. That's not enough for there to be a perception. What more do you need? Well, Dretske says this: the information in the state should be available for control and guidance of action. That's good. But in the ragweed case, that could be also true, couldn't it? Because I could have seen the ragweed on the skin there, the mark rather of the ragweed on the skin, and gone off and done things. So the third condition also seems necessary, which is that the information needs to be extracted from stimulation by accredited receptor systems. Dretske says, minimally, when you've got these three things, you've got perception. This is what it takes to perceive. So how have we got here? The core idea, the insight that Dretske has is this: if we've got experiments like the blindsight experiments on perception without awareness, then those experiments must involve some kind of way of measuring when there is perception and when there isn't, distinguishing between cases of perception and cases of non-perception. We can work backwards from those experiments to try to work out what would be reasonable criteria of perception and see whether those criteria stand up to scrutiny. Dretske's idea is that there's something close to what's going on in the experiment. We just need to add a couple of extra conditions. And when we do that, you can see that all three conditions are being met in the case of blindsight. So it does look quite plausible that blindsight involves perception.